Rogers TV. This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
And welcome everyone back to RTV Sports Rap. It is the long-awaited OHL preview show. Hello everyone, I'm Spencer Byers, your lovely host. Thank you for joining us today. Joining today, Lucas Ireland back from KW. Obviously Kitchener Rangers and somehow Owen Sound Attack fan. Don't ask me how that happened. Don't ask me. I have no idea. But Lucas, welcome in. Excited to hear your takes on the team, as obviously you are the really only non-local member of the crew.
Yeah, well, I got a few points that I think you might like to hear.
Now, obviously, again, local guys, Michael Harris of OSDSS. Michael, happy to have you back for the third week in a row. Looks like you might become a main contributor here. You're getting called up from the minors more recently.
Yeah, you got to be careful when you say yes to Mark Perry because it just becomes a permanent. But yeah, excited to be here. Lots to talk about as always.
Also see you wearing the 8x8 beach apparel. I believe that company was started by my good friend Johnny Pickett, who lives not too far away from me in Wyerton, and I believe his parents' house still just only a couple of blocks down the hill. So happy to mention them as well.
Absolutely.
As well as finally blessing us with his appearance, as I tried to pressure him into on Sunday, Mark McKelvey. Welcome in. Happy to see you, Mark, finally joining us.
Hey, good to see everybody. Times get busy, but always got time for this great crew and to talk a little OHL.
And obviously, JC Coots, who was with us for both the preseason games this year with the Attack, and obviously the home opener coming up this weekend. JC, always happy to see you.
Hey, good to see you, Spencer. You know, it's so weird that Sunday actually marked the first official day of fall. So I guess summer is officially over, so we might as well get into hockey season and talk about the OHL.
Well, it seems like Mother Nature knew it as well, because it's been raining basically ever since Sunday. So hopefully we get a little bit of sun back relatively soon, but no need for the Bay Sox, because they were able to finish the Ivy Rangers in 5 games and win the NDBL championship. They were second in the standings when the season concluded, and they were able to pull out a big championship win. So shout out to them, JC. You and I did some games this year, and you and I were both pretty well looking at the games every day about how they were doing and where they were looking, and they are able to hoist the Northern Dufferin Baseball League championship. And man, Owen Sound City of Champions for the first time since 2011, and it is a very nice and sweet feeling.
It was pretty cool to see the pictures of the Strother Cup making its way throughout the city earlier this week as it gets to visit people. I mean, that cup has been around for over 100 years and it's never been here before. So that was kind of a really unique moment. And it also at the same time is it just goes and confirms that everybody that put so much work into bringing baseball back to Owen Sound, it took some time to get the Bay Sox team here, and a lot of that effort belongs to the Bartley family, and you saw it right through the family ranks. Ryan Bartley, of course, a player, one of the leaders for the team on the field. His dad is the manager, Don Bartley. And then what's really cool is that Ryan's sons, Spencer, earlier this year, you and I, we did some junior baseball games, and we got to see the Bartley boys out playing. So like it is such a good future for baseball in Owen Sound. So much work went into making that moment possible. It took a few years, but man, did they ever get it right.
Man, did they ever. Now, that will be the end of baseball talk. I do apologize for any fans who are looking forward to that. But with that being said, I will not hold you any longer. The OHL season is almost here. It's the weekend, I believe, starts the 27th when Owen Sound goes to Guelph. And then obviously the home opener is the next day, the 28th, to finish the home and home when the Storm come here to the Bay Shore. And I'm very excited for the OHL season. I know all of you are, as well as, of course, the great Mark Perry is chomping at the bit to get back to OHL hockey. So I'm going to start with you, Mark McKelvey, because obviously you are the main play-by-play for the Owen Sound Attack. And they're a team where I'll say, honestly, from my perspective, we didn't have a lot of expectation because there wasn't much to go off of. A lot of young guys, a lot of roster turnover. And through the 4 games of preseason, a lot of positives going into the first weekend.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I think you hit the nail on the head there when you talk about expectations, because they are quite low for this group after a very disappointing season a year ago. And when I was getting ready for this season and looking at what the roster might look like and how it was going to take shape, and we started to see some certain bodies depart, whether that was an overage candidate like Cedric Guindon, for example, you definitely could tell that this team was going to be in a bit of a transition. And I know Dale DeGray won't call it a rebuild, but to me, let's basically call it that, because I guess it's not a complete rebuild when you've got possibly the best goaltender in the league in Carter George, but for the most part, you are building towards the future now. And that's the commitment with going with a lot of younger players. Got an entirely new coaching staff. And I know the talk around town has been wanting to get back to that workman-like style of hockey and making the Bayshore a tough building to play. And it's only a small sample size, the 4 exhibition games, but they've done a nice job of that so far. It's just, for me, this is just going to be a year of growth and development. And that's what's going to be entertaining about this, is that I think this team night in and night out is going to compete, whether they come out with the 2 points each and every game. You know, it's going to be tough some nights. There's some very talented teams in the league, but you just want to see the effort and you want to see them continue to take steps forward. And shameless plug, I guess, for JC's podcast, but I said it on the weekend to JC when we were chatting about the team, that already in the preseason, I've seen probably more from the first year players to this point than I would say in the last few years. And that's not a knock on those guys, because it just takes a bit of time to develop. But I think their first year players have come in. They've probably been instilled with some confidence by seeing the roster turnover and seeing the opportunity that maybe lies ahead. And they're trying to make the most of it. So this is going to be a young team that I think is going to win over the fans very quickly.
I believe so too. If they haven't already yet, Mark, I do think that it is just a couple of weeks away to see people churning into the Bayshore, just because of it being a complete facelift of a roster. Now, JC, you were there for both home preseason games, as was I. What did you make of the new look roster? Again, I think we mentioned it during the broadcast that they had a full rookie line at one point, and it was arguably one of their best lines we've seen in at least the last couple of games last year. But even just in the preseason games, they looked great.
Yeah, and that concept is not really something that I think that the previous coaching staff would have tried out, because they seem to be of the mindset of kind of the old school. We roll them as they are. We play the best guys, and that's what we do. We play the number one goalie every night. Like it was a different approach. If you liked that approach last season, you won't like what this team is doing now. This new coaching staff, it's a whole new approach. And based on the early returns, the fans are really liking what they're seeing. There's a lot more accountability here. There's continuous coaching that's happening on the bench. Technology's on the bench. Now they're using iPads to coach the players in the moment, talk about what's just happened on the ice. And at the same time, like I don't think that this is going to be a team where if you make a mistake, it's going to cost you your shift. I think that was kind of the thing last year. I mean, last year we even heard of one player at one point getting cut from a game because of being late for a meeting. Like it was just a weird old school style of system. This year, I think there's a lot more room for mistakes to be made. Mistakes are going to be made with a younger group, and it does kind of look like this might be the group moving forward, although there are still some question marks. We still got that 1/8 that Dale needs to figure out. And right now it's between Landon Hookie, Bruce McDonald, Connor Smith, who's over at Duckstamp, and Tails Jordan, who looked fantastic in the preseason. Like, I think he's probably going to be our main guy back on the blue line this year, at least with his veteran presence and with his leadership. That's a guy that's probably going to stick around. That said, you never know in the Ontario Hockey League. You never know what's next. You never know if a deal is going to have to be made for the captain and what that might bring back. Will it just be picks? Is that what Dale is looking for at this point? Is it roster players? Are there any openings on the roster right now? Because I think the coaching staff really saw what they, or really liked what they saw, what they have right now. So that's really hard to say. Those are conversations that are happening as we speak, and still some big decisions to be made. But I think overall, even though expectations are and should be lower for this season, I think there's going to be a lot to look forward to.
I couldn't agree more with. I think as the season goes on, again, this being such a young team, normally that plays into the start is the worst they're going to look, because they're going to get better and better, and the confidence is going to continue to grow as the season goes on, which would allow the team to obviously get exponentially better. Normally with veteran teams, even at the OHL level, you kind of get what you see from opening night. Like the London Knights are going to be great from the opening puck drop, and that will continue as the season goes on. And same thing for the Brampton Steelheads, as we'll get into them, as well as the Brantford Bulldogs, who both were in the CHL top 10, as we mentioned last week. But Michael, we'll go to you next. From a local perspective, the last 2 years, the Owen Sound Attack were in the CHL top 10. They never were at any point in the last 2 years after the preseason top 10 ever in the CHL top 10. So you could say they underperformed the last 2 years. So you almost could say that lower expectations, Michael, is better for this team because then they can't disappoint.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. And, you talk about the expectations. And so for me, the expectations are, Antonio Trissini, Braden Rogers, Ben Cormier, those third-year players, right, that were all brought in the same draft class, with now some, as we mentioned, some of the older players moving on, who knows what's going on with Barlow. It's those three guys now in their third year, along with some others, that need to fill some of those voids, offensive, defensively, whatever. And so they're the ones, in my opinion, in that year, as they've got 2 years of experience already, can they step up and up their performance and their production and again, bring whatever success is going to happen with this team. I think largely is going to be on the shoulders of those three guys. And just again, as in their stage of development now, I guess they could have 3 years left in the OHL, but 2 for sure. And they've got to start taking on that role. And we'll just see. I think they've had some inconsistent play, all three of them, the last couple of years, and shown flashes that they could be those players. So my hope is that those three guys, and again, there are others, but those names stand out to me as guys that need to fill the voids of some of the players that have moved on.
Now, I mentioned, Lucas, that you are both a Rich Kitchener Rangers and Owen Sound Attack fan, so I'll let you have the floor here on maybe your expectations for both Kitchener and Owen Sound before we get to a little more broader on the OHL perspective.
I won't talk too much on Kitchener for obvious reasons, but I will say something that really shocked me about the Rangers in the preseason compared to the entire season last year was we didn't have a single shootout. The Rangers did not go into the shootout at all in the regular season. They went to overtime, I believe 12 times. They were 8-4 in overtime. No shootouts. Preseason comes along, played 6 games, and all 6 of them went to a shootout. Kitchener ends up winning 5. We lost the last one to Brantford. So very, very shocking to me to see that and to even hear that stat in the first place. But enough of Kitchener for now. On to Owen Sound. I mean, the Attack were not put on the top 16 for the OHL power rankings for the preseason. And, I guess that's fair, maybe with the expectations being low. However, I do not expect that to remain the same for much of the regular season. This is a team that's got a lot of talent. I had the chance to see that firsthand when I was working alongside you guys back in January, February of this year. And, some of the talent that you guys have are amazing. I haven't seen the rookies all too much yet. I did watch some of the replay packages, some of the highlights of the preseason games. A few players really, stuck out to me, making some really good plays, scoring some nice goals. So I think that things are going to be pretty bright this season for the Owen Sound Attack, and I don't know. I'm just excited. I'm excited to see how you guys do. Will it be enough to be kind of with Kitchener? Maybe not. Will it be a battle for a playoff spot? Will you have like a secured playoff spot much later in the season, or so much earlier in the season than you did last year? You just have to wait and see.
So I will mention, as you said there, with the OHL preseason power rankings, the Attack are 20th out of 20. So they were put at the very bottom of the OHL power rankings in the preseason. The first real edition comes out on the 30th of September, so just after the first weekend of hockey. So I assume the Attack will make their way up from 20th, because I think the roster and the youth will help with that, especially once Carter George comes back from LA Kings camp, which hopefully will be relatively soon. But I do want to now go to the expectation of the team, because we talked about where maybe the fan base is, but now let's personalize it. So JC, I'll start with you. Where do you think the Attack finish in the Western Conference? And then I'm going to ask you, how many wins did they get? Because obviously we all know that the 30-win plateau has been something the Attack have strived for every single season. So do you think they get over 30 wins? And where do you think they finish in the Western Conference, JC?
Well, I talked to Dale on Sunday after the fan event, and he was very clear at the fan event to everybody. So he is on the record. He's very public that 30 is the expectation, despite all of the changes that we've seen with this group. He still recognizes the fact that 30 wins is what gets you into the playoffs, and that's what he believes this group will achieve. I don't know that they get 30 wins. The biggest factor here is going to be the goaltending, and it's going to be Carter George. And maybe that's good enough to sneak Owen Sound in at number 8. I like that for a team that's gone through this much change. Can they? Will they? Maybe surprise? Potentially. But I think sneaking in is maybe the most realistic. A lot of people are going to say that they're probably going to miss, but I think that there's just so many key pieces there. There are guys that we still really don't know because they didn't get a lot of ice time last year, so we still have only gotten like kind of snippets just through these couple preseason games of, here's what Harry Nancy looks like when you give him a lot of time on the ice. And he looks really, really good. Here's what Braden Rogers looks like when you give him more time on the ice and when you let him really open things up. So it's really exciting to see. Like these guys were picked for a reason. They're very, very talented hockey players. Dale and the scouting staff, they draft really, really well. So now giving these guys some more ice time, maybe they will surprise us and maybe they somehow finish in the top 5. But it's going to be a really tough Midwest division this year. And I just looking at that Midwest division and looking where the other teams are, it's hard not to see them finishing at the bottom of the division.
Well, Mark McKelvey, I'll go to you next. I will mention Owen Sound finished with 29 wins last year and got 7th in the Western Conference, obviously being swept by Saginaw in the first round of last year's playoffs. So, Mark, do you think the Attack at over 30 wins this year? And where do you think they finish in the Western Conference?
I have a hard time right now putting a number on it. If you were, holding a gun to my head and said I had to decide, I would say they're probably just under 30 wins. Right now, looking at the Western Conference, I've got them 9th going into the season, and we know how quickly things can change. The team I had below them was the Sarnia Sting, but I don't see a whole lot separating probably the bottom 4 teams in the Western Conference, and you do have the Carter George factor, which I think is going to get you a few extra points that some teams in that playoff bubble probably aren't going to get. Of course, he might go away for the World Juniors. I think that you have to expect that. I think he's got a great shot to make Team Canada. I've liked what I've seen, though, from Matthew Kaprowski. So I think he's going to hold the fort down very well when he gets called upon. But for me, it's probably just under 30 wins. And I like that Dale's got that target. I think he has to say that, whether and deep in his mind, that's realistic and that's really what he wants. I think that's what you got to tell the fan base, and that's what you've got to tell everybody around town, because you still want people coming out. But like I said, I just think it's the blue collar attitude and the identity of this team that's hopefully going to get created that I think is going to get people on board.
Michael, do you think the Attack hit over 30 wins, and where do you think they finish this year in the Western Conference?
No, I don't see them getting to 30 wins. As you said, 29 last year, which I think broke the streak of however many years in a row of 30 wins. I just don't see where the goals are coming from, right? Like, think of the goal scoring that has left this team, let alone the offense that Sam Sedley brought from the back end, moving the puck up the ice. Teos Jordan, yes, looks good. And I think he's a world champion with Team Jamaica, right? So hopefully he brings back some of that confidence but he's not going to do what Sam Sedley did. They're just different players. I just don't see how they're going to score goals. And again, we talked about some of the players who it's up to prove me wrong. And JC laid it out really well that they're going to get those opportunities, right? So what's going to happen? I thought Mark laid out the goaltending. It's actually, I think it's kind of us a young goaltending, right? Like Carter George just in his 19-year-old year, whatever you call it, and Kaprowski in his draft year. So, there's no veteran to fall back on when Carter George goes off to the World Juniors. I'll say when, because hopefully we're going that direction. I agree. I think Kaprowski, even in his stint last year, looked really good. But again, what I'm sort of pinning the hopes of the Attack on are a lot of question marks. I hope this happens. I hope that happens. So I think there's too much hope to say that they're going to get to 30 wins. So let's hope they can sneak into a playoff spot in 7th or 8th like they did last year. But that's going to rely on a lot of people really taking advantage of the opportunities that JC mentioned they're going to get.
I do agree with that. I believe the number was since 2011 when they won the championship. They've had 38 wins or more in every season since then until last year.
Exactly,
so obviously a very long-standing record for Owen Sound that has now been snapped. I'll go now to you, Lucas. Again, you've got Kitchener and Owen Sound both kind of on your mind, but we'll stick to Owen Sound. Do you think they get over 30 wins? And where do you think they finish this year in the Western Conference?
Well, I'm going to be a little more optimistic. I'm going to say that they will. They will reach 30, maybe a few more than that. I mean, as you said, they had a streak going on for a while of getting 30 wins or more, and it's definitely going to be close in my eyes. Again, as Michael just said, there's a lot of question marks and a lot of, hoping this, hoping that. So there's definitely a lot to kind of figure out as the season begins and as it moves forward. But I do think that, with the goaltenders that you have with Kaprowski and George, they'll be able to steal you some games in my eyes. They did last year. I'm sure they'll be able to do it again. Goal scoring will probably have some games where it's just on fire, other games where it's not so much. That happens with every team, right? So I do think that, with the mix of, goaltenders stealing some games and, I mean, who knows? Maybe we'll see a lot more offense than what we're expecting to see. Maybe we'll see less, but I'm going to be more optimistic and say we're going to see more offense than what we are currently expect from this team.
Now, I was the optimist last year, and that blew up in my face as Fred Wallace was eloquently okay with explaining to me, which I found out how right he was as the year went on. I'm going to stick to optimistic again, and here's why. Before the preseason, before seeing those two games against Barrie and North Bay, I would have been the biggest pessimist here. I would have said, I don't see them either making the playoffs or getting close to 30 wins. Just was not on my mind. Then I saw how even early, how cohesive they were, how hard they worked, all the young guys looking really good. Matthew Kaprowski looked fantastic in both games, as again, Carter George is gone at to LA camp. And with those two games in the back of my mind, I don't know if they hit 30. I'm going to say they do get to maybe 30, 31, maybe 32 wins. And I do think they sneak into 7th or 8th in the Western Conference because I just have a belief in the young guys in Owen Sound right now that I just think they're going to be able to do it. Now, they're going to prove us right or wrong. And again, the World J is going to hurt a lot of teams. It may hurt Owen Sound with Carter George, but other than Carter George, Owen Sound's going to basically go untouched. London is going to get pillaged. You got to assume that the Steelheads are going to get pillaged and some of the Eastern Conference teams. So with that in mind, Owen Sound could have a really good winner with some of the World J guys going to that tournament for Team Canada and some other countries as well as with Team USA in mind as well. So I will be the optimist here with Lucas and say Owen Sound does get over 30 and will make the playoffs with hitting 30 wins plus. So we'll now go to the greater OHL, guys. So let's stick with the Western Conference. Who do you think wins the Western Conference right now? Looking at the predictions I see from the OHL media poll, Lucas, right now London seems to be the team everyone likes. They obviously won it last year with over 100 points, beating out Saginaw. Do you think it's London's year again?
I mean, I don't see how you can't based on the years that they've had in the past. I mean, of course, Saginaw was right there with them. And, the Greyhounds fell a bit short in the points, just behind by 9 to the Knights. And, of course, the Rangers sat 86. So for me, it's between the Knights and the Spirit again. But I think it's going to be the Knights.
And then, Lucas, I'll quickly ask you also for the Eastern Conference, who do you think takes it for the East? Now, a lot more jeopardy there with how good the Steelheads look in Brampton, the Brantford Bulldogs. It's a little more interesting out there in the East. Again, with last year, 6th place and 1st place in that Eastern Conference separated by 9 points last year. So a very tight conference last year. Who do you think takes it this year?
Well, you're absolutely right. It was a very tight conference, and it was a conference that, like the battle, especially near the end of the season, was so much fun to watch to see who was going to play who. But for me personally, something just draws me towards it being the Bulldogs that take the top spot.
I'll go now to you, Michael. Who do you think take the Eastern and Western Conference?
Well, of course, London Knights, as you said. Now, and the way Easton Cowan played in that first Leafs exhibition game probably means he's coming back to London. Now, another game tonight, I think, to see whether he can even earn a 9-game stint with the Leafs. But, if London gets Easton Cowan back, I don't see how anybody touches the London Knights. Like, he's just he'll dominate the OHL again. It'd be hard to stop. But Saginaw returns a bunch of good players, 2 young players, Michael Misa and others. Anyway, so but I still think it's London in that conference, and I like the Bulldogs too. Again, they're returning a great lineup, and they seem poised to win their side of the draw. I think those two teams are going to be hard to topple.
JC, who do you like in the Eastern Western Conferences this year? Again, without seeing any regular season games played, all we can go off is the preseason.
Well, I'll start over in the East, and I think that a lot of people should like the Brampton Steelheads. I mean, they did two really key things. I mean, they were already going to be a good team heading into the offseason, but now they've got, first of all, they pick up a Carson Raycroft from the Kitchener Rangers. That's 50 goals into the lineup immediately. You've got arguably one of the best goaltenders in the league in Ivan Kovic there. So, I mean, on top of that, you've got Parker Mortone, you've got Luke Misa, who actually scored more points than his exceptional brother did last season. So that's a pretty good team in Brampton. I think that they're probably going to come out of the East. When you look west, I don't know that anybody on this panel won't pick the London Knights as the team most likely. The fact that Saginaw is still returning, as Michael said, a lot of players from last year. Like, with that lineup coming back, you have to imagine it's not going to be any sort of a bad hangover from the Memorial Cup victory for the Saginaw Spirit. But I'll say this, maybe as a team, it's anybody's guess. But what about the Windsor Spitfires? I mean, they've still got Ethan Belches coming in as the number one pick that is probably going to contribute right away. You've got Spellacy's in there. Ryan Abraham's in there as well. Liam Greentree's coming back. And you've got Greg Walters. He likes to coach bigger, tougher teams. This is what Windsor's been designed for. Greg now has a second chance in the league to kind of show that he can still do things and still win, and he's got something to prove. So maybe you like how that goes. It could go sideways pretty quickly too, but that said, I mean, maybe potentially Windsor is going to turn a few heads and challenge London.
Well, we'll see if you're right there. I saw Windsor was a part of one of the more surprising picks from the media poll. I believe their pick total was Erie, but Windsor was in the honorable mentions category. Mark, before we go, who do you think will win the Eastern and Western Conferences this year?
On the Eastern Conference, I'm echoing what JC just said. It's Brampton for me. They're all in. I think they want to make a big impact in their first season in the CAA Center, now in Brampton, just moving across Kennedy Road. So for me, it is the Steelheads, but it's deep in the Eastern Conference. And most years, it's the opposite. Usually the Western Conference is so deep. And I don't remember the last time I looked at the Western Conference going into the season, and I saw just such a discrepancy between the top and the bottom. To me, it's London, Saginaw, maybe Erie after that. I don't see anybody with a shot at the moment, the way their rosters are constructed, to challenge those teams. London, you talk about all the big boys, the Cowans and the Dickinsons, but I think a player like Sam O'Reilly is going to come back and just be an absolute force. So they're deep and they're just going to come at you in waves. For me, it'll be the London Knights to come out again. I think Saginaw's going to be very, very good. You know, they still got that chip on their shoulder. They didn't win the OHL championship, although they won the Memorial Cup. And Erie, it's been a long time between drinks with playoff runs. So I think they're going to do everything they can to compete as well to try and go deep. And after that, I just look at the rest of the Western Conference, and everybody, I think, is looking to the future. The Kitchener Rangers are looking a few years away for an opportunity to host the Memorial Cup. I think Guelph's going to be in a transition phase. I could see them dealing some of their veteran players. The Attack are trying to build for the future. So it's going to be a very intriguing season. All it tells me, though, guys, is in the future, whether that's be next season or 2 years from now, the Western Conference is going to be very, very deep once again.
Well, I was just going to mention before we go that on the media poll, the best goalie pick was Jack Ivakovic, as you guys mentioned, for the Steelheads. There was no honorable mention to Carter George, but I will say right now, I think Carter George will finish at least top 3 in the best OHL goalie this year if he doesn't find a...
Connect with us by visiting our website or email us at comments@rogerstv.com.
Hi, I'm David Shearman, host of Politically Speaking. Join me for my next show where my guest will be Rick Byers, MPP for Bruce Grey Owen Sound. Politically Speaking on Rogers TV.
I'll always protect you.
She is my sister, and she's innocent.
You saved her more than once.